Hello everyone, it's me, Aaron, Professor Thorgy, and welcome to another episode of Comic Class, the show every single week on this channel where we just geek out about comic books, and it's that time of the month again where we do our Indy Spotlight. That's right, every single month I make sure to dedicate one comic class to spotlighting an indie book that I am currently in love with, and just like last month, we're actually going to do two indie books today, and both of these indie books actually follow a rather odd theme, where they are books that come from writers who are doing their first comic ever, yet they are known for writing things in other mediums. Now, on our first Indie Spotlight today, we're going to be talking about the brand new series from Image Comics, Kill the Minotaur. Now, before this book even came out, it had a ton of hype surrounding it because one of the two writers on this book is Christian Cantamessa. Now, you might not be familiar with that name because, as I said, this is the first comic book that he's done, but you have probably heard of a couple of the other things that he's worked on, including the video game Red Dead Redemption. Yes, he was one of the writers on Red Dead Redemption, and I know that many people out there actually consider that game to be their personal favorite of all time. So there were indeed some pretty high expectations for this book. However, I went into this series kind of neutral, because even though I know many people out there consider it to be one of their favorite games of all time, I personally have never actually played Red Dead Redemption. I know, it's a classic, everyone loves it, but I've just never gotten around to it. So I didn't go into this comic with my expectations bursting through the roof. I just went into it and said, okay, let's see what this guy can do with comics. Because even though someone is great in one medium, doesn't always mean they're going to be successful in another medium. And I have to say, he is pretty darn successful in this other medium. Now, before I continue, I should also go ahead and point out he does have a writing partner on this book, Chris Pacetto, and I don't really know who is doing what on this series, who is providing what bit of insight, who is giving which character which piece of dialogue, who is crafting what part of the story. Maybe they are just truly working together, but either way, no matter who is writing what in this book, this is actually one of the most engaging series I've read this year. This is one of those books that after I finish every single issue, I'm actually kind of upset that the next issue isn't already available. As good as this series is, I might actually recommend to you people out there, just wait for the trade, because you are going to want to read this whole thing all at once. But before I continue just hyping this series up, I should go ahead and probably explain what the series is actually about. Now, I'm sure that most people out there, even if you don't know a lot about Greek mythology, you probably know the legend of the Minotaur, how it was this big beast with the head of a bull that roamed around this giant labyrinth maze, and this hero Theseus one day went into the maze and was actually able to destroy it. This is basically telling you that story. However, while that story has turned into a big mythical Greek legend that's all about heroes fighting monsters, this takes a far more horrifying approach to it. This actually treats it as creepy as that concept is of being trapped in a maze with a giant monster, but also it makes sure to let you know the monsters aren't just in the maze. It actually shows how messed up these people are that they would actually build a giant maze to keep a monster inside, and then they would go and just snatch people up to throw them inside. We have barely even seen the Minotaur at this point, but even if we never saw it, I would be totally okay with that because you don't even need the Minotaur to be a villain in this story. Early on, you meet King Minos, the king of the Cretes, and yes, I am sure I completely screwed up that name and its pronunciation, my apology. But you meet the king who is actually trapping people in this maze, and you actually see him sending his soldiers over to Athens, which Crete actually conquered, and as part of their deal, as Crete owning Athens, they now get to come in there whenever they feel like and just snatch people up, and there's nothing that anybody can do about it. And then they have to take these people to this giant maze, and you see the king come in there, and he is just this huge, intimidating, malicious ogre of a man. He is somebody who goes up to these people like they're actually cattle and just goes, oh no, this person won't do it all. Let's just murder him right here because we need the strongest people possible to be sacrifices for the giant monster that I keep in my dungeon. And our hero, Theseus, is actually a very intriguing character as well. When you first see him, he's practicing sword fighting and he's talking smack. He's talking about how much he hates the Cretes and how much he thinks his father is kind of a wimp for caving into the Cretes. And you think, oh, he's a big, brash, arrogant hero, but he's gonna be kind of like that swashbuckling hero who goes in there and he's always got a smile on and he saves the day, but he's really arrogant and full of himself. Yeah, he is kind of arrogant, he is kind of full of himself. However, he's not going to fight the Minotaur because he's full of himself and he thinks, I'll be able to defeat it. He goes to fight the Minotaur because he actually does care about his people. He is sick and tired of seeing the Cretes come in here and steal people from Athens to sentence them basically to death in this giant maze. He cannot stand seeing that anymore. So you kind of want to look at this kid and go, oh, he's some arrogant punk kid. But then when you see how much he actually cares, you realize, okay, he actually is a bit more complicated than I gave him credit for. There are some actual layers to this character. But as I said, he is kind of arrogant. He is one of those characters who thinks, I know what's going to happen. I've got this all planned out. So it's really great at the end of the first issue when he goes to Crete and he goes in there and thinks, all right, time for me to be the hero and save the day. And suddenly everything is just pulled out from underneath him. And he realizes, oh, I have totally been played myself. I'm now going to get trapped in this labyrinth and I do not know how to get out of it. It is actually kind of masterful to see a character who had everything so planned out in his head just lose control that quickly. It actually really does kind of play into the horror tone of this series, because when your protagonist is freaking out themselves, especially when you just saw them being that bolstering and that upbeat just a moment ago, yeah, it actually gets you, the reader, to kind of be freaked out as well. But issue number 1 kind of painted this as more of a realistic version of the Minotaur story. Like, you assume, okay, the monster that's in this maze, it's probably not like an actual monster, probably just some really big guy who has like a horn sticking out of his head or something like that. Probably not like an actual bull monster. This is going to be more of the dark, gritty, real world version of the Minotaur storyline. But in issue 2, when they actually get into the labyrinth, you realize, oh no, there is magic and fantasy and all kinds of crazy stuff that is defying the laws of nature in here, which again works perfectly because issue number 1 was very much set in the real world. It very much did have a very grounded stance on it. So when you go into issue 2 and they're trapped in the maze and suddenly you have organic walls that are shifting around them and purple waterfalls that are flowing upwards, yeah man, it suddenly makes you, the reader, feel like you're lost in some magical world. It makes you go, wait, how did I get here? This is not the real world that I was in a moment ago, which is exactly what our characters are saying. This book, in only 2 issues, has done one of the best jobs I've experienced all year of just sweeping the legs out from under me. This book did a great job establishing these characters and the rules of this world in issue number 1, and then just completely destroying all of that by issue 2, but in the best way possible. And as I said, they want to capture a horror tone with this book. Mission accomplished, because after just 1 issue spent inside that labyrinth, you don't know how to get out. You don't know where hope lies in this place. You don't know what is going to be around every single corner, and it almost feels like the rules of this labyrinth can change the moment that you start to figure them out, so you can't even take a moment to breathe because there is no time to ever go, I know how this works, because you really don't know how this works. And you're also introduced to a fairly large cast in this book, and it's kind of like The Walking Dead, because as soon as you start reading about them, you realize, oh, not all of you are going to survive this. I'm going to get attached to several of you characters throughout the course of this storyline, and you're not all making it out of here. So yes, if you like Greek mythology, if you like The Walking Dead, heck, I would even say if you like Game of Thrones and other storylines that feature big dynamic personalities in political roles that are kind of scheming against each other, then yeah, Kill the Minotaur is a must-read for you. As I said, I thought issue number 1 was pretty darn good. I was intrigued to see what came next, and then when issue number 2 came in and we really got into the meat of this story, I was instantly hooked. this is getting one of my highest recommendations out of any indie comic out there at the moment. But alright, that is it for part 1 of our Indie Spotlight today. Make sure that you come back later for another Indie Spotlight, in which I will be focusing on something way more upbeat and way more fun and not nearly as gory and disgusting. Yeah, these are two very different books that I'm going to be talking about today. But if you want to see that episode, then make sure that you click on that subscribe button. And as I said, we do comic book videos every single Wednesday, and on the weekends we do other fun geeky stuff like movie reviews. So if you want to see any of that, then again, make sure you click that subscribe button. And as always, give us a thumb up, and if you have read this book, then make sure that you tell me what you thought of it in the comments down below, and follow me on Twitter, Twitch, and Tumblr at Professor Thorgy. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Come back next time.